Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Record Live. We have had a bit of time off lately. I have been sick and under the weather, and you have been all over the place. You've been in Scotland, Jared, which is a bit of fun, taking some rest and relaxation. Can you tell us one of your highlights from your time away?
Oh wow, one of my highlights. So Scotland was a highlight. I'm glad it was summer because I don't know if I could deal with the Scottish winter.
First time
Um,
there?
it is the first time. So I have Scottish heritage, so I've always wanted to go and just see where my ancestors potentially came from. So that was really cool. Stirling Castle was amazing. We saw a concert in a cathedral of a
Cool.
South Wales men's choir and the
Hmm.
local boys brigade, and it was really inspiring and uplifting. It was a random thing, on your travels, you're just going around and then you just happen to be in a place at the right time and the right place. And yeah, that was amazing. Um, we also went to England for a wedding, a friend's wedding. So that was good. That was fun. But the British Museum was one of the highlights. Just seeing some of the biblical era history stuff, the Egypt, and they had Assyria, Nineveh, Babylon exhibitions, and it was just interesting to see where some of the exhibits crossed over with biblical history.
Hmm.
So I found that fascinating. But yeah, on the whole, it was a nice little trip away with the wife, and yeah, we just got some R&R, as you said, and um, probably not long enough to see all the stuff we needed to see, but it was um, it was long enough being away from the kids, so we had to get back into real life.
Sounds good. Well, we are here again. We missed you on Record Live. We couldn't do it without you. And we are
Come
talking
on.
today about loneliness, which I'm sure is a topic that many people listening will have experienced or will be able to relate to. I feel like in the last few years, probably still since COVID, we've heard of this term like the loneliness epidemic being thrown around. Um, but I think loneliness is still something that is like far more common and probably far more consequential than we think. And so, yeah, we thought it'd be a good conversation to dive into today. Now, you suggested this a little while ago, and we kind of haven't gotten around to this. I know
Mm.
loneliness is something that many people experience, but I guess I'm wondering why you were interested in diving into this topic specifically. Um,
Yeah, I've just seen Zanita around me that it's becoming. I don't know if it's becoming more and more of a thing, or I'm just more aware of it. Certainly since COVID, I've experienced a bit of loneliness myself, wrestling with questions of, I live very far away, it feels, from my family, my immediate family. And sometimes when life gets stressful, when life gets you down, you just want to connect with some like-minded people. Um, and and when I look at my contacts list, it's like who's going to really be there for me that I can open up to or have that conversation with. And you often think, oh, maybe I don't know that person well enough. That person's probably too busy. With my family, they're in a different time zone. So when I want to talk to them is when I'm driving home from work. I've had a stressful day or something, and I'm like, I want to call my family, but they haven't finished work yet because they're half an hour behind. So
yeah.
like, it's like, oh, I won't call them then, and I'll just sit here with my thoughts. And I guess sometimes when you're in your own thoughts, that loneliness can feel sharper. It can feel more um,
Mm.
extreme. But at the same time, I'm just seeing some of the commentary. I'm seeing a lot of people talk about it, and um, it can be a real mental health battle as well because um, connection, community, um, those things really help with your mental health or your mental fitness.
Mm.
And the absence of that connection can really um, negatively impact that. We've seen that a lot recent times, a lot of commentary in the media, even about the impacts of isolation, social isolation, working from home and not physically interacting on a screen like we are right now, but not interacting in person, and the
Mm.
impacts that can have on people's social lives. Um, I quickly watched a couple of episodes of the Netflix documentaries about the blue zones recently. And one of the factors that was one of the things they found was this idea of community connection, social connection. And yet we're seeing more and more people not be connected with anyone. And so I guess it's good to ask why. Why is that? And what can we do about it? I guess that's part of what we'd like to tackle today in the conversation. And part of why I thought it would be a good topic for Record Live to talk about, because at the intersection of faith and being practical with our lives and how we interact with others is this our spirituality, our belief should impact that, but also our connection and our community. Being the church means being in community. And if people are being lonely or feeling lonely, maybe they're not in community as we could be or we should be. Maybe we're not doing community right. So that's some things to think about for us today, I think.
Yeah, I think we had a little bit of a chin wag before we pressed record, and I think it's interesting because we kind of drew the conclusion that you can be lonely but have a lot of people around you still, which is certainly something that I've experienced. Like when I've experienced loneliness, it hasn't necessarily been because I've had a lack of support or people who love me. It's been because I've not been opening up about something that I'm struggling with, and so I feel alone in that. But I guess going back to that idea of church, like I think something Christianity does really well is we gather and we have things like weekly groups and we meet every weekend. We have all these things, so we aren't lonely. But if you were to talk to all of the people within those churches, many would probably still feel lonely. So it's not so much about like, do we have people around us? It's like there's something else in the mix that we're not doing well enough, or we're falling short in, or we're not educated on, or whatever, that is still making us feel that way.
Yeah, I think it's the depth of connections or how many connections we have is one thing. Are we making friends? Are we good at making friends? As an adult, it's hard sometimes to find chances to make friends. When you're at school, you're with the kids all the time. So you're with the same group of people in all your classes all year round. Like you make good connections. But when you go into the workforce and in different scenarios in your life, it's a lot maybe harder to connect in that space. So that's one thing. What level of connection are you able to achieve with people when you just only interact with them like here and there? You might see them at church on Sabbath, and you don't see them during the week. And that's the level of your interaction. How do you get into a deeper thing? You're busy with kids, you're busy with work. And so those are some of the excuses I think we make to not connect with people. We just busy. I think the other thing is we sometimes misunderstand loneliness as like, I don't have any interaction with anyone. I'm stuck in isolation and I'm not seeing anyone. I'm not interacting at all. And that's definitely one angle. You can be lonely if that is the case. But I think we've all been to a party or a wedding or where we don't know that many people, or even a church. You go to potluck, you're invited to potluck, or you go to church, you sort of stick to the outer, you come in, sit down, listen to the sermon, you wait for someone to speak to you, but you're sitting there and kind of uncomfortable, and you can have people all around you, but you're not necessarily feeling connected to any of those people. And so it's not about being completely isolated, but it's about, I guess we got to get to the heart of what is loneliness. Well, it's not just being isolated and not having any interactions, but it's also about the level or the quality or the connection with those people that you're experiencing. And so you can be busy. You can look like you have a lot of friends and acquaintances. You can have 1,000 conversations a day with different people, but it can be surface level. So when the real challenges come into your life, you're struggling to, who do I turn to? Who do I connect with now? Because I don't feel like any of those surface level interactions will quite cut it. I think that's a challenge.
There was a study that was done that I read a while ago, and it was testing, like, some people think, or they just assume friendships should happen just naturally, like they should just feel right and they should come about naturally. And then others think that you've got to put effort in. So it's like intentionality. And it found that people who thought friendship was something that just happened by luck or chance, they tended to be lonelier than those who thought it came from effort. They tended to be like less lonely and have more like flourishing relationships, I suppose. So I think I know that like often I hear people say like, I just haven't found my group or my people or my clique. And I think they're probably the people who tend to think we should just stumble upon it and like we should just find the people we, you know, kind of groove with or the people who get us. But I think, at least from my experiences, the friends that I have that are like my close friends, they're people who I've like put a lot of effort into, or like we've known each other for a long time. It does take intentionality. Like it's not like the show Friends where we just all live together and we just all like get along all the time and or date each other and then break up and then rah rah rah. Like it's different to that, but that's what we've kind of grown up seeing and watching, and so that's kind of what we expect.
I was watching a YouTube video. I think it's like a podcast, but it's the Diary of a CEO, and they were interviewing Simon Sinek, and he's like well renowned for like, you know, how you think and being entrepreneurial and, you know, hacks to a good life and stuff like this. Apparently he's writing a book about friendship because he said the exact same thing you did. We expect it to happen just by magic, and it just doesn't. It takes some intentionality. He said there's industries grown around, you know, relationships, divorce and things, fixing, you know, marriage counseling, how to be a better worker, a better CEO, a better, you know, inspired person, entrepreneur. There's whole industries built around fitness, you know, making yourself better physically. No one is addressing the need of friendship and connection. And he said, you know, that's a huge area where we're struggling, and it's impacting our mental health, it's impacting our longevity, all of these things. It was very interesting. He said, look, I've probably got quite a few people in my phone who I could actually call if something really went wrong. If I was really down, they would be there to help me. They would fix that up. But he said, I've got far less people who I could actually call when something goes well. When I have a success, or when I win something, like I've done something, it's great. Like someone that would actually get me enough to celebrate with me instead of being a bit jealous or a bit like, you know, why are you telling me this? Why are you blowing your own trumpet sort of thing? Someone that would just be there. And that really challenged me as well, because I'm like, right. So often I'm feeling it when the chips are down, like you feel a bit lonely and you're like, who can I actually turn to? But actually, if things really went badly in my life, there's probably a bunch of people that would jump in and help me there. But some of the loneliness comes in when it's just like, oh, I got a bit of a promotion at work, I want to share with someone, but no one really gets what I do. So, you know, I enjoyed my holiday in Scotland, you know, here's why I really needed it and why, you know, I felt good about it. People like your Instagram posts and stuff, but then they scroll on and there's no like celebration, unpacking, you know. And so that was quite a challenging thought. It's actually a really interesting video. It's quite long. And so I haven't finished right to the end of it either. I'm watching it in little chunks and stuff, but I was, just very interested because I saw the idea of come up. I think the episode is called in part like, this is why you can't make friends. And the guy's like challenging, like, why are we struggling so much as a society to actually connect with people and to make friends with people?
You'll have to drop it in the comments so people can listen if they want to. I would be interested. But it is a good question. I think we all hear that kind of like, oh, who would you call in times of needs? But I guess all aspects of life we want to share with someone, and so it's even those like positive things that I guess we kind of need people to turn to in a different way. I remember during COVID when we were in lockdown, I was like feeling like I just wanted to talk to people because we were inside like all day every day. And I remember like going to my contacts list and being like, I have so many contacts, like hundreds of contacts, and being like, but I don't know who to call. Like it's the same kind of thing was like, I haven't spoken to these people in years, or like, is that person going to think it's weird if I go on? And so I gave myself this like uncomfortable challenge to just like go through my contacts and just like every day call the next person, which I've had some of those contacts in my phone since I like first got a phone at 15 kind of thing. So it was a bit daunting, but it was like some of those relationships kind of kickstarted from that, and that was really cool. And some of them I've never spoken to again, but it was like, we're both in lockdown, so let's just talk for a few hours and catch up, because like, what else? But I think that is a common thing, like something that stops us maybe from taking that next step is that like discomfort, and that a lot of people these days have social anxiety, and like it is uncomfortable to make those steps, whether it's reaching out to someone or being transparent. But it's also kind of necessary, I suppose, to get what we want.
Well, it sounds like a bit of work to go through your contacts list and do that. But again, you've demonstrated intentionality there, I suppose. And I guess, some of us, we may have trouble making friends or meeting new friends, or even connecting with people who are old friends. But it doesn't seem, now forgive me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me, Zanita, that it's not necessarily a trouble that you have. I mean, you may have experienced times of loneliness, but you seem to be good at connecting with people or recognizing when you need to and intentionally doing that. I remember the story of the 7-Eleven worker who became a friend, invited to some events and different things. So obviously you're looking for opportunities, but can you tell us a little bit about, for someone who might be sitting here going, yeah, I'm vibing with this, I don't know how to do it. We could unpack all the reasons why it's hard or why society doesn't allow us to. But if I want to get intentional, how do I do it? Like, I think I have some opportunities in my life, but I'm not necessarily taking them. How would you approach a scenario where you're meeting someone? Like, how do you make that person a friend?
Yeah. I guess just for context, like I do feel like I have been blessed maybe with parents who are quite social and demonstrated that to me. Like they've always prioritized their relationships, and like growing up we had neighbors, and I don't know, it's just, I think it's one of those things that I've just been lucky to kind of grow up around, and have also inherited maybe that confidence or those skills to connect with people. But I guess I think time is a struggle for a lot of people. Like a lot of people have full-time jobs, and they don't have a lot of space outside of their job and their family to socialize. And I feel like sometimes people categorize the people in their life. So sometimes they'll have like their work people or their work friends. And there's kind of this idea that some people have that, oh, I just work with them. They're not really like my friends kind of thing. I just work with them. And you have these kind of, I suppose, principles of you can only become so close with the people you work with because you got to work with them and you got to do the job. And like, I kind of think that's maybe in some cases you need to have that professionalism, but I think you can still build like close, good relationships with people in those kind of circles. And so I think like intentionality in those situations, like if you are someone who has a job that you like, a full-time job essentially, that you're at a lot of the time, and there's other people there, I think you can still be intentional about like asking people around you how they are, and just like taking that step that's a little bit more intimate. Like you don't have to tell them your whole life, but I think starting to just grow closer with the people around you is something that you can easily do. Like, or if you work from home, then I'm sure you still frequent places like the grocery store or the petrol store. So like just take an extra step by like asking someone their name and remembering their name, and then talking to them every time you go. Like I think we can kind of inch towards these things a little bit easier than just like becoming best friends with someone straight away, or signing up to a sports class and trying to, like, I think they're all good things still, but like let's just start with the small steps, I think. And
I heard about a grocery concept. I think in Europe they're trying it in some places. You've got the self-checkout, and then you've got the express lane, and you've got the normal lane, but they're trialing these slow lanes where you go to that lane for a chat. Like, your checkout person is going to take their time, have a chat to do your groceries. And I imagine if you went in the slow lane every week and you got the same person or a couple of staff that always serve you, you could get to know that person relatively well. And have a chat, just I guess they're saying, oh, it's good for older people and for people who are a bit isolated socially. But it just reminded me when you were speaking of that, like, of these ideas, there are people trying to change the system and bring in our convenient, fast-paced, busy lives. There's people that are trying to slow down and make connections with others. I think that's important. Is this a spiritual problem? Is there any spiritual sort of connection to this idea of this loneliness epidemic? What should we as Christians be doing to approach this? Is this the society's problem, or is this our problem as the church?
I mean, I don't think the church has created loneliness, but I think it is, I believe as Christians, it's kind of our duty to, like, first of all, go and make friends with people, because we can't really, I mean, it's quite difficult to share Jesus with someone if they can't, like, see Jesus in you, or if they don't have people in their life who love Jesus and follow Jesus. And so I think it is like a responsibility for us, but I don't know if it is rooted from a spiritual problem, personally. There is a story in Luke where Jesus talks about making friends, and it says, it's actually quite a confusing story to get your head around. It's one of those ones that you tend to just, like, flip over because you're like, I don't understand that. But he does explicitly say, make friends. But I don't know, I think
I'm just wondering, people talk about the absence of the church in society and the decline of church in society, and church was somewhere you could be in a community of like-minded people, and yet the more individualistic our societies get, and I'm talking in Western societies, the more individually focused we get, the more we compartmentalize church into a few hours per week, and that's that thing. And then we don't see those people again during the week. We don't get that close or that in depth in our relationships with them. If you look at places where the church is most successful, and maybe it's just a random coincidence, or maybe there's some correlation. So let's explore. I'm thinking of this as I talk, but like in the Western world, we call the secular world, people are struggling for connection. They're struggling with isolation. They're struggling with mental health issues, but they're also not religious by and large. They're not part of a religious community, and they're not necessarily seeking that. They don't think that will give them the answer to any of those questions. But places where we see the church growing and where it's easier to share your faith because people will actually listen and are interested are places that are more communal. They are more socially connected. And so you're not just sharing your faith, you're doing life alongside other people, and your Christianity is contagious. Your faith is passed on to the people in your village, in your family, in your, it seems, I won't say easier, it's just different, but it seems to be that the church is growing in areas where individualism is not reigning supreme, running rampant. So that's what I'm thinking about. Like, okay, not that individualism is evil necessarily. I don't know. But consumerism, materialism, some of the things that come out of that are very individual basis of, things. Pride, that we always say the first sin was the devil, like, placing himself on equality with God, grasping for more in his own situation. And that's the pride of self. In some ways, all sins are based around self. So I wonder if there isn't a spiritual part to this conversation, a spiritual connection, but also, as we've discussed a little bit, the antidote to loneliness is connection. And as you mentioned, we need to connect with people it's almost a spiritual imperative so that we can share the gospel. We can't share the gospel if we have no connections. And yet many of us are fearful in the same way. Like the way I liken it, when I think of sharing my faith with someone, it's a lot easier for me to write something and even post it on a social media page of mine, or put it in the record, than it is to have a conversation with someone about my faith. It's a bit harder, but also I might have the same trouble connecting or making a friend of that person. So I'm wondering if the two things aren't somewhat linked. Like it's easy to sort of proclaim, but not easy to connect. And the same sort of stress, fear of rejection, uncomfortability that I feel about sharing my faith, I feel in some senses about making a friend. And I don't know how to go about either very naturally or very well. And I just wonder if we are struggling to witness in our cultural context because we have lost the art of connection, the art of making a friend.
Yeah, I would say so. I think that we are becoming a much more individualistic society. Like many more people work from home or work on their own. Many people are much more busy, so they don't have as much time. Like we're on technology, and we know all these things. Like we are becoming a much more individualistic society, which is hindering us from, I think, being able to form these connections. And I think I don't know. Maybe people do know that communicating and making friends is a skill, but I think a lot of people don't put time into that, or don't maybe learn that from other people as much as we could. There is this other thing. It's like a common cognitive bias called the liking gap, and it's this tendency we have to think that people don't like it. Like usually people like us more than we think they do, but I think we tend to go into interactions and assume that people aren't interested, don't like us. But it's also sometimes just like a lack of skills or knowing how to respond or knowing how to connect. But yeah, if you kind of go into social situations assuming people like you and are interested in connecting, then I feel like you can kind of trick yourself a little bit. But I don't know. I think social anxiety is something that is super common these days, which I think is interesting. I don't know if it's always been like that. I don't know if it was like that when you were young, but I think there is, like, I guess, a faulty mindset that a lot of us are carrying around.
Thanks for
it's almost like we think other people don't want to connect, but everyone does. Like everyone's looking for more like closeness and intimacy, but we're all afraid of it at the same time.
Thanks for just separating our generations there, Zanita, making me feel older. And when I was young, I don't remember. Decades ago, eons ago. No, look, it does depend on the individual as well, because if you've had bad experiences, a lot of us carry the experiences we had when we were young into every interaction. In some ways, there's that small child inside us still fearing rejection or whatever. And so when we interact with new people, in some ways it's us and the confident front that we depict, and in other ways it's that small child still like, is this person going to like me? Are they going to want to play with me? We carry that around with us. And I don't know, I guess what you're talking about is a little bit of tricking that, or reframing for that child, because it's like, actually people like us more than we may think, is what I'm hearing you say. And we're actually harsher on ourselves perhaps than we are of other people sometimes. I have heard that stat as well. And so maybe that's holding us back actually from what is a skill, a thing that we could cultivate. In that podcast I referred to before, Simon Sinek was saying, if you've got a business meeting and it's in your calendar, you'll do it. But if you've got a lunch with friends or a dinner, you're much more likely to get out of it. And I noticed that, with COVID, if you're a little bit sick now, you don't go to social events, but you do go to work, or you work from home. And so you push through the important stuff But again, that's categorizing like the non-negotiables. I can see they talked about quality, like quality measurables. And so you can measure the outcome of a meeting that you attend with an important person. Like, you know, that that will progress your agenda, your goals, your professional goals. But a date night with the wife, well, that's a bit harder to measure. But 15 years of no date nights with your wife because you keep pushing it off for business thing, your marriage is going to fall apart, right? And so I found that really interesting. The host of the podcast, the CEO, who is the Diary of a CEO guy, he was saying he's now scheduling those times with his partner, and he has to, because then it becomes a non-negotiable in his diary. And it's not that, oh, is this person not important to you that it would just happen spontaneously, etc.? He's like, well, no, it's showing that what that relationship is equally as important as anything else that happens in my life. So it needs to be given its scheduled, proper place, its important time, so I need to schedule it in. And so I was like, wow, that's an interesting way to reframe relationships in terms of how do we make sure that we're putting as much priority into those who we're connecting with as just whatever happens at work or whatever happens, the school, the kids' school appointments, or the sports, after school sports stuff that we won't miss, but we'll miss stuff that benefits us and that builds relationships and that connects us with other people in the long term. Because you can't measure it in the short term. And that's what they were saying. It's intangible, the benefit there. But after 10 or 15 years of those appointments, like, that person's the most important person in your life, or you're no longer connected and you're heading for divorce. Something bad's going to happen because you're not investing in that relationship.
That's interesting. They have like studied the physical effects of loneliness. And so we know that loneliness like affects heart disease and dementia and depression. And we even know that people who are lonely have poorer sleep, like they wake up more throughout the night. So like there's a lot of physical ramifications. We also know the same thing about like the effects of not exercising and the effects of poor diet. But I feel like when it comes to exercise and poor diet and maybe smoking, or like all of these other things in our life that we try to gain control of, we have clear, I guess, borders around things like exercise. Like we know we should exercise for 120 minutes per week kind of thing. We know that we should eat 5 servings of vegetables and 2 servings of fruit a day kind of thing. But when it comes to socializing and interacting with people, we don't really have like, we're not told to say hello to 5 people in our neighborhood every day. We're not told to have 150 minutes of heart-to-heart conversation per week. Like we don't have those guidelines, I suppose, which I don't know if we need to bring that in, but I do feel like we need to start being intentional about it, like we are intentional about eating well and exercising and getting 8 hours of sleep, because it is just as important. Like people are experiencing ramifications, I suppose.
I can see the ads now. The Heart Foundation recommends 30 minutes of eating with someone every day, or 30 minutes of conversation a day, connecting with others. It's really important. And they were using some of those examples: cleaning your teeth, going to the gym. You don't notice the effects straight away, but if you don't do it for 5 years, your teeth fall out. You've got to go to the dentist and have a really bad, thing.
I thought you were recommending us to brush our teeth with people.
Brush our teeth with people. No.
I thought that's where you were going with that.
No, but as an analogy, like, we don't notice it if we don't do it for a day. We don't notice it if we don't do it for 3 days. It doesn't make a difference if we don't do it all week. But you stack a bunch of weeks on top of each other where you don't do any physical activity, or you don't brush your teeth, or you don't, and you start to see really serious ramifications out of that. And so I think, takeaway for me from this conversation, and we're running out of time, but one thing that it's really emphasizing to me is be intentional about connecting with others. Find opportunities to get out of your comfort zone, to either make new connections or reconnect in a more meaningful way with people you haven't really connected with recently.
Mm.
How about you, Zanita? Any practical standout
Yeah,
points?
I feel like there's a quote. I don't know. It's probably one of those quotes that doesn't have a name to it, but it's like, be the friend that you want to have. And I feel like that's a good way of thinking about it. Like, instead of just expecting to just find friends, like, just start being that friend to someone that you already know, or someone that you already are in regular contact with, and just like make small steps towards that. Like, it doesn't have to be 1 to 100 straight away, but just like start. I think that is a helpful way to look at it.
That's a really helpful thing, and even you could see it as a ministry, serving other people by being there for them, and in reciprocation, you're gonna get more people who
Yeah.
look to you and come to you and are more there for you as well. So it's a win-win sort of situation. Hey, I think it's been an interesting conversation today. We covered a lot of ground. It's been quick and we're through it. But yeah, we thank you for watching with us. We encourage you to join us again next week for another Record Live. We've got a few good interviews lined up, starting to get lined up for this next season of Record Live. So thanks for joining us. And thank you, Zanita. As always, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a good time.
Go out there and connect with someone this week. God bless you all.
See you soon, everyone.
Bye.